Let's start with a paradox. How does a struggling painter, rejected twice from art school and scraping by on the streets of Vienna, become the architect of the most destructive regime in human history? By the end of his life, this one man would trigger a global conflict that claimed tens of millions of lives and entirely redrew the map of the modern world. To understand Adolf Hitler, we have to look past the biography of a single dictator. We have to perform a mechanical autopsy on the society that allowed his rise, examining exactly how unchecked ambition, weaponized propaganda, and the deep fragility of democratic institutions can hand a single person the power to destroy millions. The environment that created Hitler was forged in the absolute devastation of World War I. By 1918, Germany had suffered a crushing military defeat, leaving the entire nation exhausted, bankrupt, and carrying a profound sense of humiliation. The Treaty of Versailles locked that instability into place. The agreement carved away German territory, strictly limited their military, and imposed a massive national debt through financial reparations that crippled any chance of economic recovery. Hitler first tried to exploit this national anger through brute force. In 1923, he led a small paramilitary group in an armed uprising in Munich known as the Beer Hall Putsch. The coup collapsed quickly, resulting in his arrest and imprisonment. But the failure of this violent rebellion taught him a highly dangerous lesson. He realized that to destroy a republic, an armed assault was the wrong tool. Instead, he needed to learn how to subvert the democratic system from the inside out. Sitting in his prison cell, Hitler changed his strategy. He codified his extreme nationalist and anti-Semitic ideology into a book called Mein Kampf, and decided his Nazi party would pursue power through the ballot box rather than the bullet. His electoral strategy found its perfect catalyst in 1929 with the arrival of the Great Depression. Germany's fragile economic recovery shattered overnight. Millions of people lost their jobs, and public frustration boiled over into the streets. The Nazi Party recognized this despair as an enormous political opportunity. They offered a desperate public extreme, absolute promises, total economic revival, an immediate end to the humiliation of Versailles, and a restoration of national pride. Radical political movements rarely succeed when a society is stable and prosperous. They gain explosive momentum when the public loses so much faith in traditional democratic institutions that they are willing to trade their long-term freedoms for the promise of basic immediate security. By 1933, the traditional political establishment made a catastrophic miscalculation. Believing they could easily control a radical populist, President Paul von Hindenburg appointed Adolf Hitler as Chancellor of Germany. Hitler immediately used his new position to manufacture a crisis. Following an arson attack on the Parliament building, known as the Reichstag fire, the Nazi Party weaponized the panic, claiming the state was under imminent threat of collapse. This diagram shows exactly how he exploited a legal loophole called emergency powers. Notice how the traditional checks and balances of a democratic government are rapidly bypassed. By routing all authority to a single central node, Hitler bypassed Parliament entirely, allowing him to legally arrest political opponents and dismantle civil liberties. When President Hindenburg died the following year in 1934, Hitler simply merged the offices of the presidency and the chancellorship into one, declaring himself the Führer. Independent institutions were crushed, and secret police forces like the Gestapo were deployed to violently silence any remaining dissent. The ultimate takeover of the German state required no bloody military invasion. Absolute tyranny was legally handed over by a society that had been manipulated by fear and manufactured emergencies. On the surface, the regime projected an illusion of immense domestic success. Massive infrastructure projects like the new Autobahn highway system created jobs, while intense state propaganda engineered an image of unstoppable, overwhelming national unity. But behind this highly coordinated facade lay a terrifying reality of systemic persecution. The Nazi government enacted brutal, racist, and anti-Semitic policies targeting Jewish people, the Roma, individuals with disabilities, and political dissidents, ultimately culminating in the systematic murder of 6 million Jews in the Holocaust. Once the mechanisms of domestic accountability were entirely removed, this internal oppression naturally escalated outward. The regime rapidly rebuilt its armed forces and began an aggressive, unchecked campaign of military expansion across Europe. The breaking point arrived on September 1st, 1939. German forces invaded Poland, prompting Britain and France to declare war 2 days later. World War II had officially begun. Internal oppression and external warfare function as two sides of the exact same coin. A regime that operates by destroying the fundamental rights of its own citizens will inevitably export that same destruction to the rest of the world. In the early years of the conflict, Germany achieved a stunning series of rapid victories across Western Europe. Territories fell one after another, creating a highly dangerous illusion of invincibility among the Nazi high command. This map illustrates the fatal overreach that followed. In 1941, Hitler launched Operation Barbarossa, pushing his forces aggressively eastward into the vast expanse of the Soviet Union. This decision forced Germany into an unwinnable war fought on multiple fronts simultaneously. The initial advance was swift, but the invasion soon collapsed under the weight of severe logistical failures. The harsh Russian winter froze the German offensive in place. Their supply lines stretched to the breaking point, and they were met with fierce, unyielding Soviet resistance that violently pushed the front lines back toward Berlin. The decisive blow came between 1942 and 1943 during the Battle of Stalingrad. Germany suffered a catastrophic defeat in the ruins of the city, shattering their army and irreversibly shifting the entire momentum of the war against them. Authoritarian regimes eventually consume themselves. The unending mechanical demand for further conquest and total domination became the exact mechanism that guaranteed the collapse of Hitler's empire. By the spring of 1945, the collapse was absolute. Allied forces advanced from the west, while Soviet troops closed in from the east, completely surrounding Berlin. On April 30th, with his empire burning above him, Adolf Hitler died by suicide in his underground bunker. The scale of the devastation left in his wake remains difficult to comprehend. The deadliest conflict in human history claimed an estimated 60 to 80 million lives, displaced entire populations, and reduced once thriving cities to miles of empty rubble. In the aftermath, the global community responded by holding the surviving Nazi leadership accountable. The Nuremberg trials were established to prosecute these individuals, creating the modern legal frameworks for human rights, and firmly asserting the rule of law over dictatorial power. Today, Adolf Hitler is not remembered as a grand historical conqueror. He remains our most urgent cautionary tale. His story proves that democratic institutions are remarkably fragile, and that surrendering systemic power to a single, unaccountable voice will reliably result in unimaginable tragedy.